Laura Linney, you star in the Netflix series Ozark as Wendy Byrde, whose husband Marty is laundering money for a drug cartel, and then the whole family is driven out to the Ozarks, as has been known to happen from time to time. How did you get involved in the series?
Jason Bateman very nicely wanted me to be on the show, so he asked if I'd have breakfast with him one day when he came to New York, and we sat down and we had a conversation, and I thought, well, why not?
And he's not just your co-star, but of course executive producer and director. What was it like working with him on those multiple levels as a co-star and a director and a producer?
He's a remarkable person just without any of that, and then to be working with someone who has the decades of experience that he does. He was so ready to take on such a big challenge, and I just love being around Jason. Everybody loves being around Jason. So for him to be our, the embodiment of our leader, it just puts everyone at ease and everyone has a good time. And so it's been a really wonderful fit for everybody, for our company, for our cast, for our crew. It's a very, very happy set.
And Bateman has done dramatic work before, but he's generally best known for comedy in a lot of cases. So what was it like working with him, in these intense dramatic scenes that you two have together as this very often combative husband and wife?
Well, he's just a great actor, and I've always suspected that there was a huge range there that he hasn't really been able to explore or hasn't been given the opportunity or permission to explore before, which was part of the reason why I was also interested in doing this, was to be a part of that. So, he's just great. And it's very easy, and he's so experienced for so long, that there's an ease and a generosity.
And
was that your stomach, or was that a jet airplane that took you?
I think it might have been a jet airplane. I was wondering, because the camera kept coming back to me, so I was like, there must be a sound around me that keeps popping me up. The show begins with Wendy and Marty. They're on already shaky ground in their marriage. Not only has Marty put their family in danger to an extent, but at the same time, he's also just learned that Wendy is having an affair. So their scenes have this kind of dual level of guilt and resentment between them. How is it playing those different levels, sometimes all at once in any given scene?
It's just good old actor homework. It's, you go and you try and figure all this stuff out for yourself. And then, television is not known for its generosity of time. So you do all this work and then you show up and you hope that whatever work you've done will bleed through. But you're right. There's an awful lot going on with them. And also they're a couple, hopefully you get some sense of what a long history they have, and how bonded they are to each other, whether they want to be or not. And the thing that I loved about the show is, and the thing that I saw an enormous amount of potential in, is that here's a family who really does not know each other. These are four people who live together, who function together. They don't know each other at all. And through this extreme situation they parts of their character are revealed to each other that I think, sends them into a bit of a shock.
And it's obviously a traumatic event for not just the parents, but obviously their children, who of course did not choose any of this and have not really a lot of say in the things that happened to them over the course of the series. Do you think that in a way, since they didn't really know each other at the start of the show, even though they're in basically mortal danger for the entire series, does it actually strengthen the family, or is all kind of it's not really obviously worth that kind of peril?
Well, we'll find out, how it sort of evolves. I think there's a level of cortisol that's running all through the first season that doesn't give them a minute to breathe. And we'll see how that shakes down over the next season. What type of terra firma they're on. Is it based in sand, or is it mud, or is it concrete, or I have a feeling they never know what they're stepping onto, and what type of support is there for them. So I think it's all like they just have no idea what's around the corner.
You mentioned you doing your homework to try and get into this character's mindset and bring that to set. What kind of homework and preparation would you say that you did to try and convey Wendy?
I think I would give too much away if I told you.
Oh, so does it indicate stuff coming up potentially that that you know about that we don't?
Possibly.
Well, okay, we'll leave that to mystery then. One of the most intense scenes, I think, between Marty and Wendy in the season is episode 7. They have their biggest argument. All their anger and resentment comes out. It's been building up for that whole season up to that point. How long did that scene in particular take to shoot? It seems like it must have been an especially intense moment to build to.
Oh, it was great. Good, really well-written scenes, like that are wonderful to play. And they're actually pretty easy to play because they're so well written. So things aren't easy when they're not good. That's when something is tough and difficult. But when a scene is well directed and well written, and you have a great acting partner, it flows pretty quickly. So I think it was, maybe 4 hours. I think that took. I think that's about right.
Did you need a break after that, or did you need a lot of like relaxation before or after?
Afterwards, a little caffeine. But no, it was fine. It was good. It was a wonderful scene to do. I love that scene.
And the setting is also such a crucial part of the show. Of course, the title of the show is Ozark. It is shot largely in Georgia, though. But how important is capturing the feeling of this locale and really getting into the mood and the character of this series?
Tremendously important. And there's nothing more mysterious and powerful than a big lake. Lakes are powerful, powerful things. And the fact that this whole series takes place right at one of the largest lakes, so one of the deepest lakes, is not a coincidence.
Were you, did you spent a little time at the Ozarks at all, or was it almost all set in filmed in
most
Georgia?
Most of what we did was in Atlanta, but there was a week where we did go to the Lake of the Ozarks to do some, the big helicopter shot, the big reveal of us standing on the precipice of that cliff that goes out onto the lake. So we were there for a little bit.
Did spending a little bit of time there, help you kind of, when you were filming in Georgia, kind of channel that sense of the place?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely. The inherent flavor of the place, sure. To go roll around in it a little bit is always helpful. So yeah.
And spoiler alert for anyone who isn't caught up on the show yet. It premiered back in July. I'd like to delve into some plot details. Later in the season, there's actually a flashback episode that reveals that a lot of where the stuff got started, including that Wendy knew about what business Marty was getting into, and actually helped him make the decision to do that. Did you know all that background from the outset?
I did. Yes, I did. The decisions like that, or details like that about your character's past are sort of crucial and very important to know. And we have a fantastic writing team and a wonderful head writer and showrunner, Chris Mundy, who's very, very good about sharing information. Sometimes, strangely, in the culture of television, there can be a real divide between the actors and the writer's room and information that is not easily shared. So fortunately, we're in a situation where we're all pretty up to date about what's going on.
Was it a situation where you had all the completed scripts before you started shooting, or did you just know details and then got the fleshed out episode to episode?
There was a sense of an outline that we knew, and then we would get the scripts and enough in advance so we could do our own work on top of it.
That flashback episode also reveals other details, like how Wendy suffered depression after having a miscarriage because of a car accident. Getting to knowing the outline ahead of time. When you actually get to film those those scenes in that episode, did that really help in your head and in your performance? Flesh out this character. As you went forward from there.
Oh, sure. It certainly gives you a much stronger foundation. And you're able to cast your net a little wider. and she's the complex lady. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot going on with her. And she's learning so much about herself as she moves forward. There's something about people who are very knowing, who think they know themselves really well. And then you put them in a difficult situation and all of a sudden they realize they have resources they didn't know that they had. They have limitations that they didn't realize they had. So it's a bit of a bumper car experience.
How much affection do you think there is still between Wendy and Marty? By the end of the season, they do. She does make a choice to come back to him, but it does still seem like.
I think but I think you can't underestimate history that people have. They've had 2 children together. They've spent their early adult life and to the present together. They made deals together. They understand. They know each other well, and then they don't know each other at all, which actually is good for a potential longer life of the relationship. If there are things about the other person that are revealed that are a little surprising, that can add a little spice to a marriage. So we'll see what happens with them.
Now, when they arrive in the Ozarks, Wendy does help Marty with some of his money laundering schemes. She's coming up with ideas and schemes of her own, and I think some of her most impactful moments are when she's being proactive, like when she's trying to convince the Youngs to build the church. And one of my favorite scenes is pressuring the funeral director in a later episode. Would you like to see Wendy get even more actively involved in the business next season?
Well, she's good at it. She's good at it. There's an instinct there that is that's pretty strong, that runs through her. So we'll see what they choose to do with that.
And it does seem like some of it would come naturally to her, given her history in the political arena.
That's right. Yeah, that she's aware of how people, the politics of any inherent situation. Yeah.
Are there any aspects of Wendy that, as you mentioned, she's a very complex character that you'd like to explore in the second season that maybe you haven't had a chance to yet, or other details in her background that you're excited about looking into?
I'm very excited about it, but I'm not going to share it with you. No, one does not give everything away. But there's certainly a lot that I'm working on. There's a lot to her. There's stuff that I think people will be surprised by, and I feel just so very, very, very lucky to have this job, to be able to play her. She's fascinating, and I kind of love going to work every day.
Do you know when the season starts shooting again? Have you started seeing scripts already?
We have not seen scripts yet, although I understand they have been written, so we'll see them soon. And we all head back to Atlanta in the middle of November and start up again. So yeah, and we're all looking forward to it.
Now, clearly you mentioned there's stuff that you can't talk about, of course, about future storylines and where the story is going. So clearly it's been plotted out to a certain degree in advance. How far ahead would you say that where things would be going with Wendy?
Not as much as you would think. Not a whole lot. I have an instinct of where it's going. And there's also the difference. There's the difference between the stuff that I'm working on with her and the stuff that the writers are working on with her. So all the stuff that I'm doing, that then I will weave in and out of the stuff that they give me. So what a writer gives you is a blueprint, and then it's up to you to fill it out. So the work that I'm doing, I've shared sort of some of the stuff that I'm working with the writer's room, so they know, and the writer's room has shared some of the stuff that they're working on with me, and then the two will braid together.
Well, in addition to Ozark this year, you had a very good spring and summer, appearing on Broadway in Little Foxes, actually alternating the roles of Regina and Byrde with you and Cynthia Nixon. Performing 2 roles in one production, was that pretty much double the work and intensity of?
It was, and it's one of the best experiences I've ever had. I loved it, and Cynthia and I certainly had to adjust and change, but the whole company did. The whole story would shift and have different colors depending upon who was playing what. So all of us, there were 10 of us, and we all, had this amazing experience together.
And you know, sharing those two roles with Cynthia Nixon, you know, so she's not just your co-star. She's, you know, you basically sharing these characters. It must have been an especially close working relationship that you developed
Oh,
between the two.
absolutely, and very inspiring. You know, we were both, you know, very true to the play, but just inherently different, as two people will be. And you know, it was just great fun. You were always on your toes, that's for sure. We had to stay very sharp and very, very committed. And there were times where I really thought I was going to fall off a cliff, and because it was terrifying at times, but ultimately really incredibly fulfilling.
Did you find yourself, like, you know, the two of you kind of being inspired by each other's performances when you're like, oh, they're making a choice in that role that's interesting, and maybe
Yeah.
I will, yeah.
You know, like, and I loved that. That's what I sort of loved the most about it, was to see how one actor's choice would change the dynamic completely, you know, and how it would affect everybody. So I found that, you know, just, and which was why I wanted to do it in the first place. You know, when you have a great play, you know, it is not dependent upon one interpretation. A great play will hold many wonderful choices along the way. So it was, I loved seeing how, depending upon who was who, what dynamics would shift, and how our company would adjust, and how the overall evening of the play would have a different perspective.
And you've done quite a lot of theater work in general, and gotten acquainted with you know, a number of impressive plays. Are there any other plays that you look at after this experience and think, you know, I'd love to play multiple roles in one production of that play?
This one, I wish I thought that way. You know, I'm much better with an assignment. I'm one of those people, but I just love the theater. You know, it's a very, very different art form. It has its own requirements and its own responsibilities, and it's always a life affirming experience when you get to do it.
Yeah, next season on Ozark, you and Jason Bateman should swap. You should be Marty next season.
That's a good idea. I'll tell him. I'll let him know. Yeah.
Well, I want to wish you good luck on the next season of Ozark. Congratulations on season 1, and on The Little Foxes, and your Tony nomination for that. It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Same here. Same here. Thanks so much. Thanks for your time.